just arrived? You're going already?" "Yes, I cannot help it. Urgent business requires me at home." And entering his gig, Kostanzhoglo drove rapidly away. Somehow Khlobuev seemed to divine the cause of his sudden departure. "It was too much for him," he remarked. "An agriculturist of that kind does not like to have to look upon the results of such feckless management as mine. Would you believe it, Paul Ivanovitch, but this year I have been unable to sow any wheat. Am I not a fine husbandman? There was no seed for the purpose, nor yet anything with which to prepare the ground. No, I'm not like Constantine Thedorovitch, who, I hear, is a perfect Napoleon in his particular line. Again and again the thought occurs to me, why has so much intellect been put into that head, and only a drop or two into my own dull plate? Take care of that puddle, gentlemen. I've told my peasants to lay down planks for the spring, but they have not done so. Nevertheless, my heart aches for the poor fellows, for they need a good example. And what sort of an example am I? How am I to give them orders? Pray take them under your charge, Paul Ivanovitch, for I cannot teach them orderliness and method when I myself lack both. As a matter of fact, I should have given them their freedom long ago, had there been any use in my doing so. For even I can see that peasants must first be afforded the means of earning a livelihood before they can live. What they need is a stern yet just master who shall live with them day in day out and set them an example of tireless energy. The present-day Russian, I know of it myself, is helpless without a driver. Without one he falls asleep, and the mould grows over him." "Yet I cannot understand why he should fall asleep and grow mouldy in that fashion," said Platon. "Why should he need continual surveillance to keep him from degenerating into a drunkard and a good-for-nothing?" "The cause is lack of enlightenment," said Chichikov. "Possibly, only God knows. Yet enlightenment has reached us right enough. Do we not attend university lectures and everything else that is befitting? Take my own education. I learned not only the usual things, but also the art of spending money upon the latest refinement, the latest amenity, the art of familiarizing oneself with whatsoever money can buy. How, then, can it be said that I was educated foolishly? And my comrades' education was the same. A few of them succeeded in annexing the cream of things, for the reason that they had the wit to do so, and the rest spent their time in doing their best to ruin their health and squander their money. Often I think there is no hope for the present-day Russian. While desiring to do everything, he accomplishes nothing. One day he will scheme to begin a new mode of existence, a new dietary. Yet before evening he will have so overeaten himself as to be unable to speak or do aught but sit staring like an owl. The same with everyone." "Quite so," agreed Chichikov with a smile. "'Tis everywhere the same story." "To tell the truth, we're not born to common sense. I doubt whether Russia has ever produced a really sensible man. For my own part, if I see my neighbour living a regular life, and making money, and saving it, I begin to distrust him, and to feel certain that in old age, if not before, he too will be led astray by the devil, led astray in a moment. Yes, whether or not we be educated, there is something we lack, but what that something is passes my understanding." On the return journey the prospect was the same as before. Everywhere the same slovenliness, the same disorder was displaying itself unadorned, the only difference being that a fresh puddle had formed in the middle of the village street. This want and neglect was noticeable in the peasants' quarters equally with the quarters of the barin. In the village a furious woman in greasy sackcloth was beating a poor young wench within an ace of her life, and at the same time devoting some third person to the care of all the devils in hell. Further away a couple of peasants were stoically contemplating the virago, one scratching his rump as he did so, and the other yawning. The same yawn was discernible in the buildings, for not a roof was there but had a gaping hole in it. As he gazed at the scene, Platon himself yawned. Patch was superimposed upon patch, and, in place of a roof, one hut had a piece of wooden fencing, while its crumbling window frames were stayed with sticks purloined from the barin's barn. Evidently the system of upkeep in vogue was the system employed in the case of Trishkin's coat, the system of cutting up the cuffs and the collar into mendings for the elbows. "No, I do not admire your way of doing things," was Chichikov's unspoken comment when the inspection had been concluded and the party had re-entered the house. Everywhere in the latter the visitors were struck with the way in which poverty went with glittering, fashionable profusion. On a writing table lay a volume of Shakespeare, and, on an occasional table, a carved ivory back-scratcher. The hostess, too, was elegantly and fashionably attired, and devoted her whole conversation to the town and the local theatre. Lastly, the children, bright, merry little things, were well dressed both as regards boys and girls. Yet far better would it have been for them if they had been clad in plain striped smocks and running about the courtyard like peasant children. Presently a visitor arrived in the shape of a chattering, gossiping woman, whereupon the hostess carried her off to her own portion of the house, and, the children following them, the men found themselves alone. "How much do you want for the property?" asked Chichikov of Khlobuev. "I am afraid I must request you to name the lowest possible sum, since I find the estate in a far worse condition than I had expected to do." "Yes, it is in a terrible state," agreed Khlobuev. "Nor is that the whole of the story. That is to say, I will not conceal from you the fact that, out of 100 souls registered at the last revision, only 50 survive, so terrible have been the ravages of cholera, and of these again some have absconded, wherefore they too must be reckoned as dead, seeing that, were one to enter process against them, the costs would end in the property having to pass en bloc to the legal authorities. For these reasons I am asking only 35,000 roubles for the estate." Chichikov, it need hardly be said, started to haggle. 35,000! he cried. "Come, come! Surely you will accept 25,000." This was too much for Platon's conscience. "Now, now, Paul Ivanovitch!" he exclaimed. "Take the property at the price named and have done with it. The estate is worth at least that amount, so much so that, should you not be willing to give it, my brother-in-law and I will club together to effect the purchase." "That being so," said Chichikov, taken aback, "I beg to agree to the price in question. At the same time, I must ask you to allow me to defer payment of 1/2 of the purchase money until a year from now." "No, no, Paul Ivanovitch. Under no circumstances could I do that. Pay me half now, and the rest in... You see, I need the money for the redemption of the mortgage." "That places me in a difficulty," remarked Chichikov. 10,000 roubles is all that at the moment I have available." As a matter of fact, this was not true, seeing that, counting also the money which he had borrowed of Kostanzhoglo, he had at his disposal 20,000. His real reason for hesitating was that he disliked the idea of making so large a payment in a lump sum. "I must repeat my request, Paul Ivanovitch," said Khlobuev, "namely, that you pay me at least 15,000 immediately." "The odd 5,000 I will lend you," put in Platon to Chichikov. "Indeed!" exclaimed Chichikov as he reflected. "So he also lends money." In the end Chichikov's dispatch box was brought from the koliaska, and Khlobuev received thence 10,000 roubles, together with a promise that the remaining 5,000 should be forthcoming on the morrow, though the promise was given only after Chichikov had first proposed that 3,000 should be brought on the day named, and the rest be left over for 2 or 3 days longer, if not for a still more protracted period. The truth was that Paul Ivanovitch hated parting with money. No matter how urgent the situation might have been, he would still have preferred to pay a sum tomorrow rather than today. In other words, he acted as we all do, for we all like keeping a petitioner waiting. "Let him rub his back in the hall for a while," we say. "Surely he can bide his time a little." Yet of the fact that every hour may be precious to the poor wretch, and that his business may suffer from the delay, we take no account. "Good sir," we say, "pray come again tomorrow. Today I have no time to spare you." "Where do you intend henceforth to live?" inquired Platon. "Have you any other property to which you can retire?" "No," replied Khlobuev. "I shall remove to the town, where I possess a small villa. That would have been necessary in any case for the children's sake. You see, they must have instruction in God's word, and also lessons in music and dancing, and not for love or money can these things be procured in the country." "Nothing to eat, yet dancing lessons for his children," reflected Chichikov. "An extraordinary man," was Platon's unspoken comment. However, we must contrive to wet our bargain somehow," continued Khlobuev. "Here, Kirushka, bring that bottle of champagne."